Welcome to the podcast, Restore Yourself, Restore Your Marriage, where it's all about discovering the thoughts that get you in the mood, the thoughts that get you out of the mood, and how creating a deeper connection with yourself creates a deeper connection with your spouse. I'm your coach, Shelly Anderson, coaching you through life, love, and intimacy. This is episode number 209. Nice to meet you, Tantra. Okay, so this is a topic I'm super excited to talk about because a lot of times when I'm working with a couple and I bring up the concept of Tantra, I get mixed messages, right? I get a lot of confused looks like, okay, I've heard of that. I think maybe I know what that is. Or we get a lot of hesitation, like, isn't that just like some raunchy stuff? Isn't this all about positions? And so, what I wanted to do, and what I thought would be really helpful, is to just talk about some of the basic principles that come with tantric sex or this concept of Tantra, because they are actually quite beautiful. They are very easy to incorporate with what we are already doing. Or if we want something that feels a little bit deeper, a little bit more meaningful, then this is a great positive approach. Now, again, some of these assumptions about Tantra when they hear the word is like, oh, this is just about raw, kinky, raunchy sex. And I want you to really put that aside because that's not really what it is. And let's really dive into what these key concepts are, because you can actually think about them, contemplate on them, and really take them outside of the bedroom so that it becomes easy also to incorporate some of these ideas in the bedroom, right? When you want to be intimate. And so this is a really, really good thing to actually allow your brain to start to think about and challenge some of the negative assumptions you may have had about what Tantra is. Okay, so let's talk about this. Tantra is kind of a unique view that really emphasizes like an inner connectedness of a person, of an individual with what else is happening, right? I sometimes think about from a life coaching point of view, how you are showing up and interacting with your circumstances, the situations in your life, whether that is with your spouse, your kids, your job, your neighbors, your extended family, with sex in and of itself. What is your connection? What is your relationship to all of these circumstances? How are you showing up? How are you interacting? And going along with that, there is going to be the concept of the feminine energy, which is called Shakti, but also the masculine energy, which is called the Shiva. And it's not just about like labeling, like this is the feminine energy, this is the masculine energy, this is the woman in the sexual relationship, this is the man. It goes beyond that. It really invites you to say, what is the inner connection? How are they interacting with each other? How is the feminine interacting with the masculine? What is the interplay? What does that look like? And there are going to be energies involved, but not just energies. It's also to have the awareness that there is an interaction taking place. That is huge, right? It's not enough to just say there are energies, but what is the interaction of those two energies? I love this concept because when couples come to me and they're struggling, a lot of times it's this thing that is happening, right? We have a masculine energy that's saying, hey, I have a sex drive and I want to have sex X amount of times. And then we have a feminine energy that's like, my sex drive is different. It's composed different. It looks like this. It feels like this. And maybe the frequency is not as important to me as other components. So we have these almost two competing energies And it's not enough to just say, well, they compete, right? It's like, how are they showing up? How are they interacting? Do we have an awareness that perhaps opposing energies are showing up to the same experience? And what does that look like? What are the effects of that? Usually, when I get couples, it's because we don't know what to do with this when they are opposite and opposing. So I would love to invite everyone to really raise your awareness, raise your consciousness that we may have two opposing energies coming to play and that there's nothing wrong with that. It's just about creating that awareness, that curiosity, that wonder. What does happen when we have these two different approaches coming into the bedroom? And what are we going to do about it? That is key, having that wonder. Okay, another key component is that Tantra likes to use sacred texts. And now, for me, I'm very much from a strong religious Christian background. And so I take this and say, well, what are my sacred texts? How do I want to incorporate that into my life, into my experience, how I interact with other people, with myself, with God, with my spouse? And even when it comes to sex, how can I draw upon the scriptures to actually help me along this journey? I love that Tantra is like, yes, let's use those, right? So I would invite each of you to incorporate it. Don't separate and say, this is not related to spiritual things in any way, shape, or form. Allow your brain to say, how have I incorporated spirituality into the sexual experience? And if I haven't, how could I in a way that is significant, that helps, that's meaningful, and that helps us connect on a higher level? That could be very fascinating. Another important component is that there is often some aspect of meditation, right? Being able to slow the brain down, get into that higher space, to be conscious, to be thinking, to be aware. And there's a lot of different ways you can approach this. I want to keep this part actually very general because I would like for you to contemplate how you would like to incorporate the concept of meditation because it could be as simple as, hey, when we're ready to be intimate with one another, let's just tune in and let's just sync up our breathing, right? Let's try to be aware of our own breathing and aware of our spouse's breathing. If you've never done this, I would love to invite you to try it because this can be a very intense but awesome experience. It can also be very bonding to actually pay attention to your own breathing, to pay attention to your spouse's breathing and realize, like, hey, when I'm aware of my breathing, I can slow it down a little bit. I can have it be longer lasting. I can breathe in more oxygen. Hey, we can actually sync up our breathing, and that can be very erotic. It can be a turn on doing something. You could be fully clothed while you do this, or you can be without your clothes on, right? What if we could try to do something like that and also have the mindset of, I wonder what would happen if we just meditated for a few minutes beforehand? I wonder what would happen if we did breathe together for a few minutes before we got into the sexy stuff. Being able to approach the experience with an attitude and a mindset of, I wonder what this could do for us or what this will be like, what this experience will do for me and for our relationship. That mindset is part of mindfulness. It's part of meditation. It's part of visualizing things going in a positive way. That's all connected. to the concept of Tantra. So really dive into that and allow yourself to think, I wonder what I would like to experience when it comes to meditation in the realm of the sexual experience. Okay. Another key component to Tantra is rituals or ceremonies. And these could be ones that you learn from books if you don't know where to start, but it could be ones that you make up yourself. And I like to invite my clients to actually come up with a relaxation ritual before they get to the sexy stuff, right? Because what we often don't realize is that, especially for women, stress is a huge blocker to women feeling their own desire to be intimate. And so this is just something that needs to be looked at. It needs to be considered. And if we're able to say, you know what would really relax me? I wonder what would help me lower my stress. What type of ritual? It could be a bubble bath, right? It could be listening to certain music that you find calming and that can help you get into that zone where you're like, oh, this type of music really relaxes me. It could be watching a movie or a show or watching comedy. Like it's endless and it's very unique and individualized what it is that actually relaxes the woman and can lower her stress. But if the husband is involved in that and he knows those things, that's awesome. He can help be a part of that. He can help get the bath ready, right? Get those bubbles in there, the ones that smell really good, aromatherapy, light those candles. There are so many options, and it can be super beneficial to allow our brain to think about that and say, what would be a beneficial relaxation ritual that we could do before we get into the intimate time together, because that could really make a big difference. Okay, another important component is the concept of energy. And you can take this as deep or not deep as you want. But I love to be able to at least entertain the concept, right? I bring a certain energy into the room and into the sexual experience, and my husband brings his own energy. And sometimes our energies are on the same wavelength, and a lot of times they are not. And so it's really important to just have the awareness of how we're even coming to the master bedroom or the bed itself. What kind of energy are we showing up with? What are we bringing to the table? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it resistant? Is it rebellious? Is it angry, right? Some of these are connected to our emotions. And being able to have that awareness can help us know, like, what do we do with this? Where are we going to go with this? Is this going to be a beneficial energy, or is this going to really make the experience something awful? Our breathing can really help with this, especially if we're showing up with some negative energy. We can do some deep breathing, but also we may not know that there's something called like a body lock where we hold our body intentionally in a state of like, where we're using our muscles, we're really contracting them on purpose to like build that up and then also to release it and feel that release. So those are all really related to energy, and to be able to have that awareness, that's just a huge component. Another key component is that we are able to approach and view the sexual experience as something sacred, as something beautiful, something to be revered and reverenced, right? Not with the philosophy of like, this is just a debasing experience. This is just animalistic, right? This is just instinctual and it's just about relieving horniness. We don't have to approach sex in that way at all. Unfortunately, in today's world, with the rise and the infiltration of pornography, and it's just being pushed everywhere, it's no wonder we start to approach sex with this type of thinking, right? Like it's not beautiful, it's not sacred, it's not spiritual anymore. We're missing that component. And Tantra invites us to put that component right back in and say, it is a sacred experience. It can be something spiritual, it can be something meaningful and deep and purposeful. And that's on us to be able to bring that back in, right? We don't wait around and wait and hope that somebody's going to force us to incorporate this, but we just choose to do it for ourselves. And the way that we do that is we just have to spend a moment or two just thinking about it. How do I want to make this a sacred experience? Consciousness, right? We have to choose to put forth just a little mental effort in the way we approach the sexual experience. When we think about intimacy, we are allowed to involve all of the beautiful components that we want. And there's no limit, there's no cap. If we want our sexual experience to have three very sacred, very spiritual, very meaningful avenues and components and purposes, we can totally do that. If we want it to have 10, we can do that. We get to navigate that and create it in a way that is magical for ourselves. No one is going to limit you on that. So that's a beautiful gift that you can give yourself. So as we're thinking about intimacy as being something very sacred and personal, this could very easily promote the concept of unity of our mind and our spirit and our body, right? They don't have to be separate things. We don't have to view our sexual experience as something that only the body does. And we can view it very much as like, no, it's an integration of all of the components of who we are. There is a unity that takes place. Sometimes when we separate those things, we have a harder time with wanting to be intimate, especially the women. But if we're like, hey, I could really try this idea, this notion of unifying my sacred beliefs, my spiritual beliefs with my mind, within my heart, and within my body, man, that can feel so different. There is an emphasis of unity. There is an emphasis of love. How these three components connect, not only within yourself, but then how do we connect them with our spouse, who's also having his own experience with those three components, right? The mind, the heart, the body. When we integrate those three components, that's where the game changes, right? That's where we start to experience sex in a different way, in a higher way. And usually we enjoy that. It can be transformative, right? Because we're no longer viewing sex in this lower, less mature way, but we're actually jumping up to the higher brain and saying, let's think about sex with purpose, with intentionality. Okay. Another component to Tantra is that there is an approach where there is a willingness to be the learner and also the teacher. And maybe not at the same time, right? But being able to be flexible back and forth. Maybe um let's say you're going to have sex tonight, right? You are going to say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to go in as the student, as the learner. I'm going to ask questions. That's going to be my mindset, right? And you're going to ask a lot of questions and you're going to allow yourself to wonder about things and learn the answers as a result of you being inquisitive. And then let's say later on, the next time you have sex, you can take on the role of maybe this time I'm going to do a little bit of the teaching for my spouse, and you will approach it differently, right? Like, oh, my body really enjoys when you do this. You're teaching through your language. Yes, this is good. Or the noises that you make, or how your breathing increases. You're teaching what works well, what works for you, and maybe also what's not working well, right? So there's a willingness to take on both roles and experience both roles so that the experience of sex with your spouse is one that is nurturing and growing and moving forward. Now, that's a concept that a lot of people don't talk about, right? Like that you can be a learner, that you can be the student, but you can also be the teacher at times, and being able to say, I'm going to take on both roles and experiment with both roles. That is awesome. So you could ask yourself this question if this seems new to you. Are you able to give guidance during the sexual experience and take on kind of that guru role, that teacher role? And at the same time, ask yourself, am I able to receive guidance? Is my pride in the way? Do I not want to hear any corrections or any little pieces of advice or tidbits or modifications, right? Sometimes we can get very upset if our spouse wants to give us just a little bit of guidance, right? We become offended. Are you easily offended? And if so, you might want to look into this concept. Okay, we're almost done here. We just have a few more. But the next concept of Tantra that I find very beautiful is the integration of dualities. It's like it's taking the opposites and saying it's not enough to just say that there are opposites, but like, how are we going to integrate them? How are they going to work together? How are we going to create harmony? This is often very much the yin and yang sign, right? The symbol that we see all over the place in the world. It's about making these things work together, right? Think about a husband's and a wife's libido, right? These are not usually the same. Sometimes they are polar opposites. And so with Tantra, we don't say one is right and one is wrong, one is better and one is worse. That's not even the concept or the approach. We want to get away from those labels and those extreme ways of thinking. We don't want to fall into the trap of black and white thinking. What we want to do is say, we are approaching the sexual experience with this philosophy and this philosophy, these desires and these desires. How are we going to collaborate? How are we going to work both of them in? How are we going to harmonize and capitalize on the positives of both so that we have a better experience, a more expanded experience? Just going to the wife's experience or desires or only the husband's wishes and desires, it limits our experience of what intimacy could be. Why not expand that and have a much more expanded experience of intimacy that incorporates the best of both worlds? Now, that would be awesome and amazing. Being able to approach sex in this way also can create a sense of unity. Like, hey, yes, this is collaborative. It's not like a compromise where I give up a bunch of stuff. It's a collaboration. This is a creative endeavor where we both bring things to the table. That can feel very unifying. That eliminates power struggles, right? But that it's an experience where both can contribute. Yes, I love that. Okay, two more. A very important one. I probably think this is maybe my most beloved component of Tantra is that there is a personal transformation that happens. It is about your own journey, your own personal development, your relationship with yourself when it comes to sex. This is the ultimate goal, is that there is growth that takes place, right? That you're not stuck, that you're not just doing it out of duty or pity or to keep the peace, right? But that there is an actual experience where you progress as a human, as a person, as an individual. And as you're able to do that as an individual, you're able to do it as a couple. We have to be able to let go of our pride in this process. And maybe this is going to be a huge blocker for the husbands, right? Being able to be like, I'm a man if I have sex 3 times a day with my wife. That's what it means to be a man. Maybe we're going to have to let that go a little bit and be like, if we're just having sex and my wife is having zero pleasure, like, are we really a good lover in that arena? We may need to let go of some of the concepts that the world has provided for us and really say, we need to take a different approach to this, look at it different, think about it differently, and make sure that both the wife and the husband are having an experience that they are happy with, right? We need to move away from just focusing on frequency and the quantity and actually look at the quality. We have got to make that shift where we are focusing on quality. For the wives, I've noticed in my practice that there needs to be a focus of actually generating and creating desire for intimacy within ourselves, not have it based solely on what our spouse is or isn't doing. We create desire for ourselves, and then we can collect it. We can build it. We can gather it. And that is a fun place to live with your spouse when that starts to build up. And men, because they're usually turned on much easier than their wife, their focus can be on like, what do I do once it builds up, right? When I have the desire to be intimate and my wife's not there yet, then their focus can be on like, how do I channel this? How can I show my wife like I'm into her and still bridle it, still rein it in? And I want to just point out this key mystery, this key ingredients to a husband's sexiness is that when you can show your wife you're interested and bridle it, channel that desire, that sexual desire, she finds that very attractive, very sexy. It is sexy when she watches you rein it in, not shut it off, not extinguish it. But when she sees how manly you are, that you are in control of that desire, that is a big turn on for your wife. So think about that. Embrace that. Jump on that train. Give her the look up and down and then take a step back because she's not used to that. When she sees that, she's like, wait a minute, maybe I don't want you to take a step back. Maybe I'm going to take a step closer to you. So we each have new ways to really understand how we are showing up, how we are transforming, how we are growing and developing when it comes to the sexual arena of our lives. And then this last one might be one that we haven't thought about before, but there's like ethics. There's a conduct that comes with Tantra. This isn't like, hey, we're all animals, anything goes. That's not what Tantra is. It comes with like, hey, there is a respect here. There is compassion. There's a responsibility. And there are components, there are spiritual components, there are respectful components that we want to start incorporating. This isn't like a free-for-all. This is not hedonistic, right? It's incorporating all these other things to make our sexual experience something far more than we ever could imagined within these things that we love and believe in our values. Like we can incorporate all of them. We don't have to eliminate them. We can incorporate them and it's actually going to enhance the experience. So I hope you're able to really think about some of these components of Tantra this week. Dive into them, apply them, experiment with them. Take the approach of, I wonder what things would be like if I tried one of these this week. Because remember, the more you restore this type of intimacy with yourself, the more you restore it with your spouse. Thank you so much for listening today, and I hope you will join us again next time.